Have you ever thought about not getting older over time? Not only that, but actually getting younger. Scientists have been working in laboratories on the problem of the aging human body ever since science existed. And what are their results? That's anybody's guess. Or is it? Today, I'm bringing you 3 of the most successful humans in the field of longevity. They managed to reverse their own biological age more than anybody else in the entire world. They are called longevity athletes. They play a new kind of sport where they compete against each other in turning back the clock, in getting younger. Even so, they aren't just any longevity athletes. They are actually the top 3 of the longevity World Cup. We have Wen Z at 3rd place, Zdenek, Sipek on the 2nd place, and Dr. Mike Lustgarten on the 1st place. I'm your host, Nopera73. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Adam. By the way, quick comment. So you're looking more fit. I know you lost some weight, Adam. So nice job, nice progress. I'm looking forward to you being atop the boards and Pheno Age leaderboard coming up.
Watch your back, man.
Yeah, I hope you guys can beat me. You know, I'm happy for others to have success. I'm not so narrow where it's got to be me. I want everybody to flourish. So,
well, we'll see. New aging clock's gonna change the game, won't it? Anyhow, I started the Longevity World Cup 1 year ago, exactly 1 year ago. And fast forward today, over 100 athletes registered, shared their blood test, and competing with each other. And the first season has concluded. And you guys have secured the first 3 places on this competition. So, you know, I'm really excited about this. This is probably the largest podcast that I have ever done.
So we're technically the OGs, right? We're the originals for this competition, which I hope, and this depends on you, Adam, because you are the master organizer. So the longer you're interested in longevity, the longer you're interested in being the ringleader for organizing these competitions, hopefully we can be doing this still 20, 30, 40 years down the line. And then the question is, are the OGs still OGs 20, 30 years later? And then that's the real test of longevity.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So
it depends on you, my friend. You are the ringleader.
Well, there's already a Hall of Fame in the very first page of the Longevity World Cup, so your names are written in stone now. All right. Wen Z, you are a mysterious person because we've never done an interview before and no one knows anything about you. So I guess I want to just say that your biological age is 0.4 years old, but you don't look like a baby. How come?
Well, my chronological age is pretty young, so I think that probably helps my pheno age. I know the data is supposed to be trained on people all the way to infants, but yeah, I think my chronological age probably helps. Yeah, 4 months, I think. But.
All right, so what should we know about you? Your background?
So, I'm Wen. I'm 20. I'm currently a student, and I study neuroscience, physiology, and nutritional sciences. And I'm really passionate about health, wellness, longevity, performance, all that stuff. I'm a curious guy.
All right. Hopefully we'll learn a little bit more later on. Let's go to Zdenek. Zdenek, what's going on with you?
So I'm still from the Czech Republic. I teach at high school, mostly English. Otherwise, Of course, I'm also interested in longevity, but also in other subjects. I have already mentioned cancer recently because of my not so positive experience or family experience with it. Always been more or less keen on sports. I played tennis like for 10 years when I was young. Besides English, I formerly studied history and psychology, but now I'm mostly interested in biology, longevity, and cancer research, also off-label drugs and their application for general health, longevity, or in the anti-cancer context. And I'm also interested in the microbial burden. That's the domain of Michael, I believe, because I strongly believe that this is very well related to longevity and maybe even the primary reason for us being mortal, as in the studies of Litsky and his colleagues. That's the main reason why we age, according to his research. The microbial burdens and microbes, and death is the protection of the species from it, because it lowers the microbial burden, because the older subjects carry the heavier burden, and their death is therefore beneficial for the species because it lowers the overall burden, meaning microbial burden of the species. So that's another area I am interested in, to put the longevity into the context of evolution. Because as the saying goes, nothing in biology makes sense if you can't place it in the evolutionary context.
So according to this theory, if I understand it correctly, old people die because they accumulated too many parasites over the years.
Yeah, microbes, all types of parasites. So viruses, fungi, bacteria. Yeah, and then they would pass it to their offspring. And that would lower the fitness of the group and of the species, if I simplify it somehow. Yeah? Of course, when they die, the burden is somehow lowered.
You guys have anything to add?
So wait, Adam, initially you said that we reversed our biological age. Technically, it's reduced it, right? I don't know. Reverse makes it seems like it's like some permanent thing, where reduce is more technically accurate, I think.
Technically, are we really measuring that?
Which part? Measuring
The
biological age?
biological age.
I mean, yeah, phenoage is a metric of biological age relative to chronological age. So,
Oh, is it? That's not what it correlates with anymore. That was earlier generation of biological ages.
oh, you're talking about risk. Is it chronological age risk? This is technical. This is a super technical definition.
Super technical.
But, yeah, okay. All right, you got me there.
Okay.
All right, and then, hang on. So I got a couple things too. So with Wen's negative or very close to zero biological age, phenoage, the youngest age, if I remember, the NHANES training and test sets were, I think 18-year-olds were the youngest. So my interpretation of your data is not you have the data of a baby, because even baby and prepubescent and pubescent kids have different biomarkers in terms of what's optimal relative to post-maturity. So if anything, I'd say that your biomarkers are closest. It's more of if you're 20 years old and your data is 20 years younger and it shows your biological age is 0, it's like saying you have the expected biomarker values of someone your age, which is the ideal that you can have. So that's how I would interpret that.
Zdenek? Zdenek.
Zdenek.
Yeah, that would be optimal.
Are you sure? All right, Zdenek. I just want to make sure I got it right. All right. So I got a couple things. One, germ-free mice are not immortal. So if you raise mice without a microbiome from birth, born in a bubble, they still die. They don't have a and I'm with you on microbial burden, especially in the non-bubble world. We live in a non-bubble world. We're exposed to microbes 24/7, inside and outside. And microbial burden systemic does increase during aging. But the argument against immortality with that is if, like I said, if you put germ-free mice and grow them in a bubble from birth, they still die. So there are endogenous aging mechanisms that are independent of the microbiome that still cause death. All right. And then two, I don't know if you're familiar, this is more on the cutting edge of science, but Michael Levin, are you familiar with Michael Levin's work?
Not really.
Yeah. So he's, I don't want to shortchange what he does, but he's a scientist at Tufts and he studies bioelectricity. And basically, when you have cells, normal, healthy functioning cells, they communicate to each other with bioelectric signals through membranes. And that coordinates, one cell coordinates basically what they should be doing through groups of cells. Okay. So what his group has found is that in the situation of cancer, cancer is actually the situation where cells break off from the collective and have different bioelectric signals relative to the group. So his group is focused on basically attacking cancer cells by getting their bioelectric signal to be back, inserting them into the group where now they're not cancer cells. Now they're interested in rejuvenation as opposed to cancer. I don't know if that helps you, but it may be something you want to look into in terms of Levin's work on bioelectricity and cancer. Because to me, this is the most potential for real change in aging relative to the pharma, which you take a drug and it kills some cancer cells and then it wipes out some other cells, or does all kinds of adverse physiological things. Whereas the bioelectricity thing, if you get the bioelectric signal right, like I said, you can reverse that cancer cell to get it back into the collective where it doesn't want to initiate or, have cancer systemically.
Yeah, I would just add that concerning these germ-free mice, the question is it really germ-free?
Yeah.
We might think so, but from the birth, for example, aren't there many pathogens already from mother?
The mother and the whole colony is in bubbles. They're the mother, the father, they're all germ-free, giving birth to germ-free in a bubble. So it's completely sterile. Look into it. You'll.
Yeah, okay, I will. For example, Mark Linton is interested in this topic too, and his, let's say, position is that these mice are not really germ-free, that we are just unable to identify the germs, that we don't even know that many germs or majority of germs, in his opinion. So how can we identify them then? They are intracellular germs. So that's his position.
So whole genome sequencing identifies all microbial DNA. You can even use techniques to look at microbial RNA, sterile mice. Look into it. Yes.
I can attest to that. I'm actually I'm an undergraduate research in the microbiome and how it regulates host cancer risk. So I think we have a lot of overlap, and I actually do a lot of work with germ-free mice and their microbiomes. So I can assure you that they're pretty germ-free.
Okay.
Well, and who are you, Mike?
Everybody knows me. I don't know. I'm Conquer Aging or Die Trying on YouTube. I don't know how else I should describe myself, but it's easier for others to describe me. But yeah, I'm the champion of the first year, I guess. That's how I'm defined here presently.
Right. So Mike is a YouTube influencer. All right.
I guess that's how you want to.
Look, Mike is a very, very respected scientist in the longevity field. Well, I think the reason is because you have results, and we are not only talking about the longevity World Cup here, but also some kind of out of this world dedication in measuring what you're eating down to the last micronutrients, and then doing statistical correlations and acting upon those actually statistically significant N of 1 experiments, right? So it's not just like an N of 1 experiment in a Brian Johnson kind where I did this experiment. I think it did something, but it's like I did this experiment and this is statistically significant that it did something. Right. Try to follow that.
So in Brian's defense, he used to be worse with these things. Like he did HBOT and it changed his biomarkers for one test. You know, this is not very rigorous. You'd have to do 5 on, 5 off, and then compare the two, you know, with HBOT, without HBOT. Do you really see a difference? Because, you know, there's just variability from test to test, but he's getting better where he's using more data to try to come to conclusions. It doesn't always have to be statistically significant. You know, even if you use a p-value threshold less than 0.05, just from the issue of false comparisons. So out of 100 tests, 5 will be false positives. You don't know which 5. So if you have 10 significant correlations, 5 may be rubbish and the other 5 may be real, right? So sometimes I'll actually look at things that are a bit outside of the p-value, because the only way to find out if that correlation is real or not is to increase the food, to increase the supplement, decrease it, and that tests the correlation. And if it's a real correlation, it'll get stronger, closer to 1 or -1. And if it's a false correlation, it'll get weaker. So I use that data. It's not perfect because, you know, if I only focused on glucose and ignored everything else, I'd have the best glucose on the planet, like forever. But the real challenge is this multiple biomarkers at once and trying to find the local minima where, you know, you improve more biomarkers than get worse. And then it's that constant iteration of trying to improve the worst biomarkers, because who wants to have some worse biomarkers, right? But it's about finding that local minima across the board for a multitude of biomarkers. I should say too that you know, I should have won. You know, if there were betting odds and, you know, people knew the whole competition before it started, I should have been the overwhelming, I'm going to sound like an egotistical guy, but the overwhelming favorite. You know, you'd have to bet a lot of money to win some money as opposed to the underdog, right? Because I measure 8 times per year. So the probability of me having a really good result should be high. And then I've got 40 plus PhenoAge results going back 7 years, right? So I'm basically the most experienced player in the game. If anybody's going to bet on who's going to win, it should be me, right? So I don't want to undersell my accomplishment, but, you know, there's also that.
There is no sport without betting.
Someday people may be betting on us, you know, so.
Yeah, I mean, that's very much in my mind. I didn't just came up with it. I've been thinking about implementing some kind of betting since forever, since before even the competition started, right?
I think that'd be a great way to raise revenue, especially people who don't want to maybe participate. There's so many people in the longevity community who may not want to participate and just bet. But if you make the betting cheap enough where they can put in $1, I say $1, maybe Bitcoin is the best way, right? You know, but $1, $2, it doesn't have to be hundreds. People want to bet hundreds of dollars, but I think there'd be a lot of people betting very small sums of money to try to win some. And then you can use that somehow for the, you know, competition winnings. I don't know. I'm sure you've thought about this more than me.
Yeah, I'm thinking about the same lines, you know. Also, there is one thing that I've been thinking about, that if there would be betting, then perhaps I would have offered Zdenek to do a ultra HSCRP test and then take you on for the first place.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to. I'm just switching labs right now, so there are 3 labs nearby, so I plan to use it like twice each in a row and then compare the results. And of course, this SynLab should be able to measure HSCRP, but I'm not sure if it will be more precise than 0.4. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So we will see.
Oh, so you measured standard CRP for this?
Yeah, and otherwise I have always 0 standard CRP, but so it was counted as 1.
Yes, right.
in the competition.
Oh,
Because the lab wasn't able to prove it that it's really 0. They said somewhere between 0 and 1.
yeah.
Yeah,
It's not
definitely
HCRP.
Yeah.
Wait. So have you played around with the PhenoH? If you put in an HRCRP of say 0.3, what would your PhenoH have been?
Yeah, like slightly better than your spread.
Yeah, you probably should be the winner this year. I'm second place. The probability of you not having HSCRP less than 0.3, I think is very low, very low. I'd be shocked if you didn't have HSCRP lower than 0.3. So yeah, congratulations.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I've never had a measurable HSCRP either. My current submission only goes down to 0.5, but with tests that go down to 0.2 and 0.1, I've never had a measurable one. So next year I probably gotta. My current lab doesn't offer sensitivity that high, but I'll probably do like 2 different labs in a day.
So which lab did you use? I mean, Quest?
Life
Lab-
labs. I'm in Canada, so
Gotcha, right.
a little bit different.
But both you guys, man.
Yeah.
Uh,
Wait, Mike, you mentioned that you think my biomarkers, they're really just expected of a 20-year-old,
yeah.
but like don't you think you know, PhenoH is a mortality risk model trained on adults.
Yep.
And obviously it doesn't mean I have a mortality rate of a 4-month-old, because that's probably even higher because kids die all the time. But you don't think it's so that my biomarkers are so low risk that within like the adult data set, my predicted mortality risk is better than the average 20-year-old? You don't think it's equivalent to the healthiest extreme of the distribution, because it's still calibrated as like a continuous risk model. So
Yeah.
I think it would be better than an average 20-year-old, but obviously it doesn't mean I have a mortality risk of a 4-month-old.
Yes, I wasn't trying to downsell your data at all. And there's great value in being 20 and having the ideal biomarkers for a 20-year-old. All 20-year-olds don't have biomarkers of a 20-year-old. There's going to be a distribution. So your biomarkers are the best it can be for your chronological age. And you can't say that for all 20-year-olds. So, and you're making a good point about mortality risk. The mortality risk of the baby is not what PhenoH is measuring, because, as I mentioned, the lower end of the age range that the data was trained on was 18. So your mortality risk should be essentially the lowest mortality risk physically possible, because you're chronologically young and you have the biomarkers of the best 20-year-old that you can possibly have. Like, I don't know I didn't look at your data, but I'm guessing albumin was like 5, lymphocyte percentage was 40% or higher, white blood cells probably around 4, creatinine probably 0.8, 0.85, right? Am I in the ballpark of all these data?
Around that. My white blood cells are a little odd, but yeah, around.
On the lower side.
Yep, with a very high lymphocyte.
Yeah, that's how it should be. These are exactly the biomarkers you would expect to find in the most youthful 20-year-old. So that's how I would see it. I wouldn't say, even though it sounds like a slur to say you've got the expected biomarkers of a 20-year-old, but there's tremendous value in that, because all 20-year-olds don't have the biomarkers of a 20-year-old. You can have horrible biomarkers as a 20-year-old. Yours is the best it can physically be. Now, the challenge is, when you're 25, all your biomarkers are the same, all the PhenoH and all the other ones, right? For me, it's not just one test. It's if you're able to, at 25, at 30, at 35, have exactly the same biomarkers you did and you do now you've really flattened aging rate. And what does that translate into in terms of mortality rate? If you can do that for the next 50, 60 years, where albumin doesn't decline or creatinine doesn't increase, right? So that, to me, I place more value on that than in, a singular test.
I agree. The name of the game, like you always say, it's to resist age-related change.
Yeah, but I think, unfortunately, a lot of people don't think about it like that yet. It's still, I have this one test. This is my biological age. This is my aging rate. But does that even represent a full year average? And then what does your data look like for years past, and what will it look like in years present? No, very few people are thinking about it like that now. So
Yeah. But I mean, I do think, you don't think my biomarkers would be better than, say the ideal 20-year-old, because it just, it, having like a pheno age of 4 months old, I think it means that, that my biomarker profiles are far healthier than the average 20 or the 18-year-old.
yeah.
So it just extrapolates downwards. I don't know if it means I have the ideal biomarkers of a 20-year-old. I don't think we know how to interpret that yet. It's certainly better than, a 20-year-old, but
It's the best. It's the idealized. It's as youthful as you can physically get. The saying that it's like a baby is somewhat of a misnomer. I mean, but it's the best you can physically get. For example, like there are going to be upper limits on these things. So if 5 is optimal for albumin at 20, is albumin of 6 even better? Even though one person had an albumin of 6, which may be related to all kinds of things. Like there's just an upper limit that's going to be the ideal biomarker or group of biomarkers, right? So I'm not trying. It sounds like I'm downselling it, but I'm not.
no. I see what you mean.
You've got you're 20 years old and your biomarkers are exactly where they should be for a 20-year-old, but there's just you can't make them better. Like, you can't say, oh, my creatinine is 0.7 now, and sure, that reduces my pheno age by a little bit. But is that really better than a 0.8? And then is that 0.7 versus 0.8? Is that related to a little bit less muscle mass? So I see it's a tremendous thing to have the best biomarkers at your age. There's no downside to it at all.
I think, not exactly sure, but I think, like, for each individual biomarker, there's a point where it doesn't further decrease your pheno age.
Yeah. Well, but for things like albumin, if you keep going higher, pheno age will keep going lower. That's why Adam put caps on some of these for white.
Yeah. Within his caps, I mean.
Yes. But I don't remember what the cap was for albumin. It might be like 5.4, but
there is no cap for albumin because couldn't find all-cause mortality over 55, over 5.5.
But for white blood cells, like you could go, I think, all the way down to 3.4 or somewhere like that.
Something like that.
Anyway, your data is great. I don't want to make it seem like a...
No, thank you. I see what you mean.
It's just they couldn't, it's like when you train your data on a age range from 18 to 80, which is what PhenoWave was trained on, for it to make a prediction that you've got the biological age of a toddler is somewhat a misnomer. It's impossible because the data was trained on 18 to 80-year-olds. So even if there were people older than 80, it would be at a bit of an extrapolation. But that 20-year reduction, which is close to the theoretical maximum, I mean, again, it goes back to your data is as good as it can get, or as close to as good as it can get.
Yeah, I think we certainly don't know how to extrapolate past the 18 to 80.
You can, but it would be less accurate, so...
So if I may ask just the questions about white blood cells for Michael, where would you see the optimal for white blood cells?
Just white blood cells, or do we So
for starters, white blood cells.
Right. So I find little value in looking at the total number of white blood cells because just like cholesterol, which has HDL and non-HDL, and they move in different directions during aging and their associations with all-cause mortality risk, white blood cells are in the same category where you've got neutrophils and monocytes that increase during aging and higher being worse in terms of all-cause mortality risk. And then you've got lymphocytes, which decline during aging. So if you're measuring only the total white blood cells, your neutrophils and monocytes may be increasing and lymphocytes decreasing, and your white blood cells are constant over time. So some labs get around that by looking at the neutrophil to lymphocyte ratio, because if that increases during aging, neutrophils going up and lymphocytes going down, a higher ratio being bad, that's one way to get around this total white blood cell number as an important metric. But I prefer to look at the individual cell types. So I combine neutrophils and monocytes, and I look at lymphocytes and then have what's optimal targets for each of those. So if you just look at neutrophils, All-cause mortality data, lowest risk, 2,000 to 3,000. If you just go to lymphocytes, somewhere around 2,000, lowest all-cause mortality risk. So now if we're looking at the lower limit of neutrophils and the optimal limit for lymphocytes, so we've got 2,000 to 2,000, 4,000. And then monocytes, what's optimal based on CVD and non-CVD related measures can be around 300 to 400. So if we take the lower bound there, so now we're at 4,300 for white blood cells. And then other white blood cell counts like eosinophils and basophils, it's a very small fraction. I mean, it's like 30, 40 cells. So you can make the argument that somewhere around 4,300 for white blood cells is optimal. But how that distributes is important. And then I know I'm like geeking out on the data, but even within lymphocytes, you can subdivide them. And that's important because those change during aging too, where CD4s go down, CD8s go down, NK cells can go up, and B cells can go down. So even within lymphocytes, 2,000 may be optimal based on all-cause mortality risk, but you've got to actually look at the individual subtypes to try to get at, is my 2,000 lymphocytes optimal? Is maybe 1,500 or 1,600 optimal? So if I was going to make a white blood cell what's optimal target, it would be no higher than 4,300, but it could be even a bit lower to somewhere around 3,500.
Okay. And concerning monocytes, so have you got any ideas how to lower them? It's like my weak point.
Yeah. So
Slightly weak point. I have it like around 12, 13. I don't know the precise number.
So when it comes to immune cells, including monocytes, the lowest hanging fruit for most people is body weight. So getting lean, but you're already lean. So there's something else going on. Like most people are carrying excess weight. And if they get leaner, their white blood cell counts come down. This is well established. The best thing I can recommend is, and I don't know how much you want to track your own data, but for a week before every test, I'd recommend tracking diet and supplements. All of the measures, if you have sleep and HRV, resting heart rate, when is the last workout before a blood test? That can influence immune cell levels. So tracking as much data as possible for a week before every test. So now every test has some amount of data that lines up with it. And then if you do that for every test, you can then start to look at correlations in your own data. And then more than me giving you a general recommendation for lowering monocytes, you may identify patterns in your data that are linked with higher monocytes. It could be you did too much exercise the day before, or maybe your sleep duration was too little the day before. It could be lots of things, but you've actually got to track within your own story. And even there, this story may not be obvious after the third test or the fifth test, but in looking at correlations with your own data, you can, start to do the experiment. All right, the data show this, I'll test that. Oh, it didn't work. All right, something else popped up, I'll test that, right? So to me, that's the best approach for trying to figure out within your own story what may be causing it.
Yeah, like for the last year, it seems to be like pretty stable. I have, I know it in percents. I have lymphocytes, let's say around 50%, and then neutrophils around like 37, 38%, and then this remaining number is mostly monocytes, of course, like around 12, 13.
The total white blood cell number though?
It's like around from 4.5 to 5.
Okay, so neutrophil. So if I find more value in the actual cell numbers than the percentages. So 37% or 40% for neutrophils. So we're looking at around 2,000, which is close to the optimal target. You said 40 what percent for lymphocytes?
Lymphocytes around 50, let's say.
50. So yeah, 50 times that 5,000. Oh, that's a little high, maybe 2,500, right? So, but if your white blood cells are 4,000 times 50, now we're at 2,000, right? So that's pretty close. If your lymphocytes in cell numbers is 2,000 to 2,500, you're pretty good there. If you go above 2,500, you may have some things going on like EBV infection. And then, so the monocytes, 12, 13% times 4,000 would be 480 to 600, which is a bit on the higher side. It's not to the point where it's dramatically associated with increased all-cause mortality risk, but yeah, for your body weight, I'm surprised that it's not even closer to half that. Like I said, you'd have to track your own data to see.
Yeah, I've discussed it with AI, for example, and it mentioned that this is like a typical profile with elite athletes. So I don't know. It's hard to say.
So AI is only going to give you the general recommendations of what's been published, but and those are small studies, the athlete studies. It's the big 400,000 people studies and more. We're a little bit lower, maybe better, but we're not talking about like 3-fold higher risk. I mean, this is like maybe 10% higher risk. But
yeah, I've thought about fast mimicking diet, maybe as a kind of optimization for the immune system. And I'm also under this, let's say, modified thymus regeneration regimen by Fehi, using amino acids instead of the growth hormone. So maybe there might be some impact from that.
Right, but
on the monocytes.
So monocytes are going to increase in proportion to microbes. So the question is, what's triggering the increase in monocytes? Which microbes? And then are there things in your approach that you're doing that are making it worse? Like even on a quote unquote healthy diet, there could be things that maybe your genetic evolutionary history wasn't adapted to, and that could trigger an immune response and correspondingly more monocytes. So even though fasting mimicking diet or these general recommendations might work, I find the most value in tracking your own data and trying to figure out your own recipe. And then asking the AI for help, maybe with interpretation.
I definitely second the tracking your own data, because you talked a little bit about this. It's really all so individual, because I've been following self-experiments and I've been doing a little bit of correlations myself, and I can say that we have very, very, very different rate limiting steps in terms of moving these biomarkers. So the best way we have to tackle these like longevity biomarkers right now is just to embrace the dirty data and to like track it yourself and to see how things correlate, because yeah, it's also individual, I think. But I think I am also aware of like some studies showing high vegetable intake that can lower monocytes and lower total white blood cell counts. I don't know what your diet's like, but
yeah, of course, my intake is pretty high already.
Yeah,
definitely. I think that it's like 6-7 cups at least.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And I think it is
6-7
cups.
I think it is
Yeah,
mediated by microbes like Collencella and stuff like that.
Yeah. So when the challenge is that aging is a moving target. So, if you look at your own correlations now, you may, and then you collect them over time, 10 years later, there may be, obviously I agree about getting in the weeds with the data, right? But, then we've also got to have the tools where it's like, okay, stuff that worked in terms of correlations when I was 20, even though that's still a part of the correlations, I may only have to look at the correlations for the last 2 years and not the first 8, because aging is a moving target. So there's so many.
It's also dirty, but you just kind of have to move with it.
Yeah, definitely.
All right.
We're making your job easy, Adam.
Finally.
Definitely waiting on your to make the correlations easier.
So we're very close to actually an AI mic that I'm going to post on Patreon. So that'll be first. My developer actually started off as a Patreon. He's still a Patreon, but he's got a full-time job. So getting him to finish off the correlations, and we're so close on his end, it's been a major challenge. He just goes off grid for like months at a time, and I can't do anything to get him. Adam knows how the developer types are, so. Or maybe better, maybe they're better in your world. I don't know.
Doesn't matter anymore. Yeah, I just write all the code now, so.
If it doesn't hallucinate, and you have to know if it's like if you just ask it to crunch some numbers and it gives you data back and you can't actually crunch those numbers yourself, and maybe giving you actual literal rubbish. I've done that experiment, and I'm super hesitant to use LLMs for data analysis right now.
It fakes it until it makes it. Guys, let me ask my very first question of today. Everyone who's listening came for this, so so finally it's about time. Wen, what's your secret?
My secret? The whole suite. I think, physical activity obviously is a big pillar. I'm a competitive track and field athlete for the short sprints. You gotta get the sleep locked in. Sleep, obviously, I prioritize that. Going to bed on time, giving yourself enough time in bed to get your actual required sleep duration, maybe tracking your sleep as well. For me, I use an 8 sleep and a Whoop. All the things related to sleep, like temperature control, like dimming lights, winding down, all that stuff. Sleep is another big pillar. And diet. I also track every gram of food I eat. I do some stats with it, but not as much as Mike, but predominantly, like most of it is just greens and a lot of fish as well, plant protein, and some supplements here and there. But it's a long list, but I don't think those are the primary drivers of what is contributing to my good pheno age. But exercise, obviously, consistent exercise 6 to 7 days a week. Plenty of strength training as well as sprints, which is high power sort of. It can kind of count as HIIT. It's not like a steady state cardio, but there's plenty of aerobic adaptations that you can get between set rests, rep rests. Obviously having a clean diet and just like not messing things up, making the right choices. Like don't sleep late, don't eat junk food, things like that. Got a long list of supplements, but
Sure. I actually have a dilemma, not even a question, that, you are 20 years old, and I don't know how many 20 years old you've talked to in this longevity field, but I don't think there are too many, right? And it's like, are you having enough fun? Like,
this is fun to me. Other people ask me this too, but this is like, I don't know, like, I don't know if it's because I'm a nerd or something, but this is fun. Like, it's fun waking up and not wanting to like lay on my bed more and like scroll on my phone. Like, it's fun to be healthy. It's fun to not feel fatigued during the day. And also, I mean, like, I just really like the science, these like mechanisms, they interest me. And like, it's interesting figuring these things out. And it feels nice to feel good, to, be disciplined, carry out these things. And I think I also really love cooking. So like, I think that really helps me stay on track with the diet. I'm a big food person. Obviously, like, I like sports as well. So the physical training, it's not really like a thing I have to make myself do. It's sort of like a highlight of the day.
I think there's been somewhat of a societal shift with your generation. Like, I think I read that your generation is less likely to like go out, get drunk, stay out late relative to other generations. And then that gets me thinking, like, your generation is my generation because that's how I am. I've been like that, the odd monkey in my own generation, like not wanting to go out, not wanting to get drunk and stay out late. So I think there's a societal shift where a small but growing amount of people are wanting to be healthy and feel good, just like you mentioned, as opposed to, get drunk, feel like garbage the next day or a few days, and then for what?
Yeah, that's
Most people
precisely my point.
Yeah. Most people around me, though, there's like most of them do some sort of strength training, but in terms of the other stuff, if you tell them to like not have shawarma for a month, they can't do it. They can't do it. Or not drink. But
You're with definitely in
strength training, yeah, people are planning to do that.
And you could make the argument about fitness too. Most people are just generally fit, eat real food and exercise, but then that potentially higher level of what's the recipe, what's the personalized exercise and diet plan and supplement plan. Most people lack the bandwidth, I find, to do that. But eventually everybody's going to do it. It's just going to be, can we make it accessible for the world so that it's easy? where you don't have to think about it, right?
Zdenek,
So
your sec-
I think the only way to make it easy is to make it like into a system.
Yeah.
And I have it as a system, and now it's like completely automatic. It's a lifestyle. So of course I prioritize sleep. I go to sleep pretty early, like within an hour or two. So now it's like 6 p.m. here. So 7, 8, definitely not later. But I also get up pretty early, like at 4:30 or 5. And immediately I exercise like for 40 minutes. Then the days proceed according like to the fixed plan. So I eat my breakfast, mostly veggies with some fish, herring, things like that. Then I'm at work, but later in the day, I mostly prepare my meals myself too. And it's usually plant protein or once again fish like salmon. And then while I'm doing it, I usually listen to the summaries of various studies I'm interested in. I have it prepared, for example, in a notebook, LM, and then I can play this summary. So it's another point. And then I often study things, and that's pretty much it, or read. Never been keen on partying or drinking, smoking, maybe because of the bad example of my father. So I don't like it and I avoid it. And I also have to say that when looking at my students, I don't think that young people are very healthy. Some of them exercise, yeah, it's specifically the strength training, but many of them live a seriously unhealthy lifestyle with phone addiction and very unhealthy diet full of junk food, energy drinks, and chips. I see it, unfortunately, every day. So that's reality. And as I have said, discipline is critical. Having a system, you fall to the level of your system. That's reality. And I tweak it slowly, step by step. That's my recipe.
But I think to Wen's point about, and your point about discipline and younger people, being strength training and having a decent diet. So I think the lifestyle stuff is relatively easy. Granted, discipline is hard for most people. That's the biggest challenge. Diet, exercise, sleep, most people can do. What I meant was like the higher level stuff where you're using the data to try to figure out like this whole idea of precision nutrition, precision exercise, how much exercise for how long, at what intensity, how many days per week. This is where I see just going beyond the lifestyle stuff of, yeah, I'm active, I exercise, I eat well. Like to me, this has been known forever, right? But the step above that is how much exercise, like, and all of that. And what is the optimal diet for me that optimizes not just biological age using PhenoAge, but all these things that PhenoAge doesn't include, that may be different, and maybe the recipe needs to be a bit different. So that's where I think most people, the eyes gloss over and they just don't have the bandwidth on average for now, where they can do the basic things, but to do the extra steps, the extra layers that few people are doing for now, that most people just gloss over. But eventually, that, like I said, with accessibility, if you take a picture of your food and that gets uploaded to an app, and then that app puts it into the AI, and then it's all provided for you, the data is all crunched, it makes it much easier. That's what I meant about accessibility and making it easier for people where they want to take the extra step of what is precise and optimal for them as opposed to the general lifestyle stuff.
I think like at the moment, for that extra like level, you have to be really intrinsically curious about the stuff for you to do it. Like you have to be like somebody that likes getting in the weeds of the science, and somebody that just like enjoys optimization, not just in terms of health, but everything. At the moment, it's like that, but hopefully in the future, it'll be easy.
But the thing is, I see it almost like, and I'm going to say sports competition, and the word competition makes Adam's ears perk up. But if you think about like basketball, right? So you think about the professional NBA players and LeBron James and Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant. These were not, hey, I'm going to go to the park on a Saturday and play some basketball and just shoot around with whoever's there, right? The best of the best are deep in it, 24/7, love what they do, sacrifice everything out, almost everything outside of the game, whether it's, they got to practice shooting or dribbling, the whole thing. Then that trickles down to people who are not as committed, maybe recreational basketball players who, like us, instead of testing 8 times per year like me, maybe they test once or twice per year, and that's just the best they can do. And that's better than nothing. And at once or twice a year is fun for them, because to them, that's like going to the park and just shooting around or playing a little local game. But the question is, how big of a field can what we do with the, hardcore of the hardcore diet, lifestyle, exercise, and then trying to optimize the bloods, and then all of the recipe that goes into optimizing the bloods, being like the best of the best athletes in the field, and then people, at various levels of interest below that, just doing what they can, just like the recreational basketball player. So I kind of see it like that. How big of a field can we become? Is this going to be like thousands and hundreds of thousands of people, or are we just limited to, the few that are unplugged from the matrix? It is just a limited size population because it's so niche. I don't know.
Well, already it doesn't cut it if you guys are doing normal CRP tests, right? You're not dedicated enough. Got to work on that. Well, alrighty. And Mike, what's your secret?
Well, everybody knows the correlations, but like I was saying earlier, I've tested PhenoAge 40 plus times over the past 7 years. I blood test 8 times per year. The probability, even without the correlations, because I've done it so much, I've got so much experience in it, that that's part of the secret sauce. But yeah, we've talked about it. The secret sauce is the correlations. It's not a perfect system. There's always going to be noise. I've had plenty of experiments and tests where I've tested strong correlations and it didn't move the needle. Over and over and over for many tests, didn't move the needle. But if you test enough and if you measure your own data enough, eventually the signal starts to separate from the noise, and you can get a sense of, is higher fat better? Is lower fat better? Even within fat, should I have more omega-3? How much omega-3? But even then, it's like, if you only focus on PhenoAge, which is a small sliver, what about other things that are emerging biomarkers, cystatin C, B2M? What's the recipe for optimizing everything, not just the small things? So it's always a work in progress.
My name is Daniel Allen. I work for Business Insider. I'm the host and producer of The Limit, where we're exploring things that are on the frontiers of technology, science, and the human body. And the next episode that I'm working on is about why it's almost impossible to live past 115 years old. Obviously, the people that I'm speaking with today are trying to make that less impossible. And we're joined today by the founder and the top 3 winners of the first Longevity World Cup, which is a competition designed to reduce biological age. So, Adam, I wanted to ask you to start off, when did this competition start and why did it need to exist?
Right. We started this competition 1 year ago. The reason why it needs to exist is because I believe we might have a chance to achieve longevity escape velocity through competitions rather than other kinds of work, because people are crazy about competitions.
Let's clarify that. When you say longevity escape velocity, are you talking about literally not dying?
Yes, I am talking about literally not dying.
Wow, that's a heavy concept. And when it comes to the competition, what is PhenoAge and why is that the standard that's the measurement for the competitors in your competition?
Right. So the history of biological aging clocks started with epigenetic clocks. And epigenetics is a new field. scientific consensus. The science is unsettled there. However, PhenoAge is a blood-based biomarker, and people are much more likely to take it seriously if we are using the traditional blood-based biomarkers. But every year, the competition is going to change its biological aging clock. So the first year was PhenoAge only.
How do you, as the organizer, ensure that the competition is fair and square?
I have a couple of strategies. If someone gets to a higher place, then I make sure that to have a conversation with them. I ask some questions. Sometimes I ask for their IDs to check their real age and stuff like that. So I have some methods, but ultimately it's like a soft.
Yeah.
There are soft
Got it.
rules here. Also, you have
Okay.
to come to the competition with your real face, with your real identity.
Got it.
Lying with your real face and your real identity is much more
Right.
harder than otherwise.
What do the winners win by coming in the top 3?
All right. So they win prize money. The prize money is made from Bitcoin itself. There are historical reasons for that. I was a Bitcoin developer, created a Bitcoin wallet, and my network has donated about, I suppose, $4,000 US for the winners, and they've been distributed between these 3 guys.
Michael, I'd like to turn to you. You won first place in this competition. You did a total of 22.1 years reduced off your biological age. Your chronological age is 53. How does it feel to be number 1?
The big picture is if there was ever a favorite to win it, it should have been me, which sounds egotistical. But the reason behind that is I'm not new to this. I've been measuring blood biomarkers, especially the ones in PhenoAge since 2015. I have more than 60 blood tests overall over that 10-year span. I have about 43 or 44 for PhenoAge since 2018, since it was published. So I have the most experience in measuring with this test. And I also test 8 times per year blood tests. So that means if someone's only measuring once or twice, they have, 7 or 6 or 7, less tests in order to get a good result. So that's the easy, low-hanging fruit of why I should have been up there to start with and why I ended up being, the champion. But digging into, there's more to it than that.
Right. And also, since you mentioned it, I believe you've competed in other longevity competitions as well. So it seems like this is, something that has been part of your lifestyle for a long time. I want to move on now to Zdenek. You reduced your age by 20.6 years. Your chronological age is 47. As the number 2 in the top 3 of this competition, what part of your routine is the hardest? You find it the hardest to maintain discipline around?
In general, I don't have problems with discipline at all. I'm a perhaps extremely disciplined person. If there is like a minor tweak or problem, maybe occasionally I have like a piece of chocolate or something like that, but nothing else. I am like very regimented and strict with myself. And I like it, in fact, that way.
Yeah. I mean, that's what it seems like. And I think all the competitors would probably agree that that's maybe one of the things that sets you guys apart from, the average person. And when, you got to help me understand, you de-aged 20 years, but you're 20 years old. So help make that make sense to me, please.
So the model doesn't really work for like a biological age below 18. So, we don't really know how to interpret that, but, it just means that I am much healthier than the healthiest and the youngest people in the NHANES data set. But,
right.
Yeah.
Right. It doesn't mean you're 0 years.
It doesn't actually mean I am 0 or 4 months or 4 months old.
And I guess the question for you is, aside from being a longevity athlete, are you an athlete in other sports? And why did you decide to do this kind of a competition at your age?
So I'm also a track and field athlete in the short sprints. So I used to do a lot of football or soccer as well, but I don't know if I'm really treating this as a competition. I don't know, I'm like intrinsically interested in, health span, lifespan, longevity, geroprotection, performance and health in general. And I think, since I'm doing all the right things and, making the right choices, I happen to be doing well as well.
It seems to me that this, more than a competition, is a community. And I was just wondering, and this can be anybody who wants to, what's the importance of sharing information among this community in order to make advances and make new discoveries in terms of ways to optimize the human body?
I think it's huge. At like the highest level of longevity interventions, they're dependent on N=1 experiments. They, like these different interventions, they really don't track across people. Like Mike shares plenty of his experiments. A lot of them don't move in the opposite direction for me, but yeah, it's definitely interesting though, and like it's inspiring to like see how serious other people are treating their stuff and experiments that they're doing. But I think like most of the sharing comes from like the basics of health and wellness. Like
say more. What are
it's all the stuff like that,
the
the Peter Attia, the Brian Johnson stuff that they're sharing, the Rhonda Patrick stuff, like sleep, exercise, omega-3s, all that,
I think the normal person is confused when they are listening to all the podcasters and all the scientists who are working on longevity. Like there are so many opinions and right ways to do things and optimal ways to do things, but ultimately the people who are really having results here is these three people, the top longevity athletes.
Daniel, I should say that so I have a YouTube channel and I've got a multitude on videos on quote unquote what's optimal for biomarkers, and I've detailed my approach going back 5 years with the correlations, looking at your own correlations to try to get this towards this road of what is the optimal diet for me, what is the optimal exercise plan for me, not just the general recommendations. So in terms of that, you asked the question about sharing in the community. I'm very open for most things. I mean, some of the what's optimal stuff is paywall, but I do this as a full-time business too, which anyway, but I'm happy for anyone to beat me. I'm very, I want as many people to chase, optimizing their health and potentially longevity as possible. And I try to be inclusive as possible, not, competitive to the sense of you're my competitor, I can't share anything with you. I don't see any value in that at all. I see it as collaboration.
Okay, I would say that I have my protocol on my Substack and it's widely accessible for free to anyone. Now I am writing in English. I've checked. And it's free of charge, and I don't plan to charge anybody for anything. I think this information should be shared freely and improve people in general all around the world. That's my opinion.
And that's fantastic because, as part of the story that I'm working on, I'm going to be starting my own longevity journey. Next week, I'm going to a place called the Human Longevity Center, where I've gotten a media rate to do a full body MRI, full blood work, genomics, and a number of other testings as part of their executive testing program. I'm going to be honest with you guys, I am a little bit nervous about this experience because they told me that approximately 1 in 10 people, I'm 39 years old, approximately 1 in 10 people, even in my age range, after the full body MRI finds something that they need to act upon immediately. Whether, I don't know if that means that it's like a tumor or something, God forbid, but like something that needs to be followed up on. So I guess my question is, how can I take that nervousness and anxiety and use it as a way to be more productive towards better health? Like, I'm sure that, maybe at the beginning when you guys started these processes, you kind of maybe found a surprise about your own body. And then so how can I kind of pivot into taking actionable steps to improve my biomarkers?
So I can tell you what their actionable steps are going to be, regardless of if something shows up on the MRI or not. And they're going to give you general lifestyle advice: eat less junk food, eat more vegetables, right? So this is the general stuff. This is the eat real food and exercise approach. To me, there isn't anything novel about that. If you want to dig deeper, if you do have something going on, whether it's cancer or something, anything, whether it's biomarkers aren't optimal or not, then the big question is personalization. How can you get towards the optimal diet? And right, how can you do that? So what I recommend people do, and what I do, is before every blood test, tracking diet, exercise, duration, sleep, HRV, all the things you can think about tracking for at least a week for every test. And then do that for every test. It can't be one test per year. Like, if you're a sports fan and you hit 4 home runs in one day and you have the best day ever in that baseball game, are you the best baseball player to ever play? No, you've got to go through the whole season. So you've got to measure more than once per year. And for every test, track some information for at least a week. And then after many tests, start looking within your own data to see what may be moving the needle. And that could actually help personalize whether, if you do have something that's a tumor or something else that may be growing. Granted, you may need, chemotherapy or cut it out, right? That's the obvious. But in order to really reduce risk, you've got to figure out, is there stuff in my approach that was enabling that bad thing to grow, right? And the only way to do that is objective biomarker tracking over a very long period of time.
The goal, I obviously live in a world where I'm a journalist. I have deadlines. So we are going to be doing this testing next week. I'll get the results a few weeks after. And the idea is to adopt some changes to my lifestyle, like you said, the basics, and maybe add some supplements or other interventions. What, in your experience, what are biomarkers that someone can have a real impact on in a short term, like maybe a 2 or 3 month period versus an entire year? What are some biomarkers that we could be looking at, and I could, after get my results and then adopting some behavior changes, actually see a difference?
Yeah, there are 2 tiers to that: the easy and the more advanced. So the easy is just going for a body composition scan, so you know how much muscle, fat, and bone, visceral fat. And then with weight loss and improved diet, you can improve lean mass, reduce fat mass, reduce visceral fat mass, maybe optimize bone density a little bit, even in 3 months. The question is, how deep do you want to go down the rabbit hole after that? Because what's under the hood is the step above: eat real food and exercise. And in order to really reduce disease risk and potentially slow aging and maximize lifespan, you've got to know the what's under the hood stuff: cells, proteins, metabolites, etc.
I think if you were to look at like blood tests, I think one that you could move in a short period of time, like maybe half a year, a couple of months, is blood glucose or HbA1c or fasting insulin. And I think that's a pretty big needle mover because it's a pretty good indicator of your whole metabolic health.
Adam, I
Right.
think you had something?
Right, something for your whole body MRI, because I've just done one first time in my life, right? And the first time when you get anxious is when you go into that machine. That will be an experience for sure. But you see, for me, it found something, but it found something that I've been having problems with, and I didn't know what it was. And it turns out I had chronic inflammation in my nasal passages, right? And all I have to do is spray some stuff in my nose for a couple of months, and my decade-old allergy suffering, seasonal allergy sufferings are going to go away. Sometimes you find some good stuff as well.
Wow, that's a really good point. Okay, now we're going to do a rapid fire round. Each person just say in a sentence or two, if you're heading to a desert island and you can only bring one supplement with you, or thing that you take as part of your regimen, and you're going to get, it's the only thing you're going to bring with you, what would it be? So round robin. Zdenek, you want to take it first?
So possibly the most recommended one and research one is creatine. So I would perhaps take that or recommend that.
Yeah, I actually last year before I started working on this story, I started taking that, and I have heard very good things about it. Michael, go ahead.
If I'm on an island and I can only bring one thing, optimizing longevity is not the top priority in that moment. It's
Obviously.
I mean, got to figure out how I can get back to my normal quantitative lifestyle. So can't do that there. But if I had to, then even my answer is going to be outrageous. I'd bring a clinical chemistry analyzer, like, these big machines I've carried on my back, pull my own blood, but it's sci-fi.
All right, good answer. Wen, what about you?
I think if I was like literally on an island, probably like a really good tent or like a sleeping bag, because you can get plenty of omega-3s from the fish, right? Around the island, a lot of seafood.
Vitamin D
Like
from the
there's
sun.
gonna be no refined grains. I'm gonna be eating a bunch of vegetables, scavenging for all that stuff. There's creatine in fish as well. I don't need a multi. I think I'm gonna get all my bases hit from all the, assuming it's a tropical island. I get plenty of all the nutrients. So I don't think it'll be a supplement. I think exercise, I'm gonna do plenty of body weights. I want to be chasing around animals. So you've got exercise and diet sorted. I think it's sleep. Like I need to be comfortable sleeping, thermoregulated, I need to be safe. I need to not have my sleep disrupted. So probably it's like a good 10 in a sleeping bag.
So, and then I guess I just, let's think a little bit bigger picture. One of the things we're going to be looking at in my piece, obviously, we already covered the idea of the basics, right? Sleeping right, eating right, taking care of your body, exercise. But there's frontiers now in science that are promising but unproven about ways to radically extend your life. I would like everybody here, starting with Adam, just to say one area of science that you're paying very close attention to that would now be considered science fiction, but you're feeling hopeful or interested that it should become science reality in terms of radical life extension.
Yeah, as I see, it's stem cell therapies or gene therapies are the ones that are coming from the laboratory to actual people doing these things in this day and age already. So perhaps gene therapy is what I would say that is coming closest.
I think that we should take a much more serious look at cryogenics as society, and maybe in the future, even if we die, then we can be, let's say, restarted and live again in somewhere time further in the future. I think this is really like underappreciated area and completely ignored by science and by society, even by journalists. It's like out of discourse. That's my opinion.
I'm actually glad you said that, because we do have some interviews with cryogenics companies, and we will be absolutely touching on that. Yeah, thank you for that. Wen, what do you think? Frontier science for radical life extension.
I think I'm gonna second that, because I don't think we're close to longevity escape velocity yet. But yeah, on a more realistic front, I think modulation of the mTOR pathway with rapamycin, and I think gut microbiome science is also very emerging in terms of maybe not radical lifespan extension, but like I think it can do a lot more for normal, longevity, and at least, becoming a centenarian than we might think.
So I have some quick thoughts on cryopreservation, and I've thought a lot about that. But as a quick note on that, I've had this conversation with others where, I have a daughter, so that's, maybe 80 to 100 years of someone who will care about me being cryopreserved. And then if she chooses to have kids, and I'm a grandpa. So then that's another push that 100 years out to, another 150, 180 years of people who know me, who would care about keeping me cryopreserved. But cryopreservation costs money, right? So how many generations do I have to get away from me being a great grandpa or great great grandpa where they're paying bills for someone they never met? And then they have to make the decision to just let me thaw or keep paying that bill. So I don't want it to be 200 years down the line where I'm stuck frozen in carbonite and then someone decides to pull the plug and then I'm just out of luck, right? So there is no plan B for me right now. Cryopreservation is an option, but there is no plan B. I've got 70 years of potential maximal lifespan to get off of this giant panic room that is death hanging over us all, and there is no backup plan. We can get into the philosophy of maybe what my senses perceive as reality is only a small sliver of reality. That's a whole another story for another day. But to answer your question about rejuvenation and lifespan extension, so even though there are things like Adam mentioned, like stem cells extend lifespan, and Wen Z mentioning the gut microbiome, which having a quote unquote bad microbiome will shorten your lifespan and a better microbiome will optimize your lifespan. There are no immortal animals with the best conditions for stem cells or microbiome. In contrast, what are mechanisms of rejuvenation and immortality in organisms that already exist? So there's a scientist at Tufts. His name is Michael Levin. He studies planaria. These animals are immortal. Their rejuvenation capacity is probably the best on Earth, where if you cut a planaria into, I think, 280 different parts, no matter where that part is, whether it's the tail, the arm, it will grow into a whole new planaria. How do they do that? How do they have such great regeneration capacity, and how are they immortal? It's bioelectric signals in between cells. So humans are not so different, where our cells communicate also through bioelectricity. Bioelectricity being the membrane proteins that allow ion gradients. So if you can restore bioelectric signals in the old versus young, you can technically rejuvenate an animal and maybe push their lifespan out. So if I had to bet, that's my big bet. I think that's actually where the field is going to be. It's going to be the dominant field of rejuvenation 50 years from now. Whereas most people are just kind of poking at the bear with, pin the tail on the donkey for now.
Wow. That was great. Thank you guys for that. What do you think is someone who has bills to pay, other things, children at home that are all expenses and, running a family. What do you think is a reasonable amount of money that someone should be spending per month as a beginner to supplementing their diet? What should be their budget, let's say, for longevity interventions if they're just starting out and want to start to improve their lifestyle? I mean, obviously you guys dedicate your life and probably a huge amount of your income to these endeavors, but what do you think is a number figure that someone should expect to spend starting out in, the first per month for like a year, let's say? And you can go, Zdenek, you could start first.
So my number is pretty low. It's definitely not more than $100. So these results are achievable, at least in the Czech Republic, with $100 a month, maybe maximum 200, no more. So this is not out of reach, definitely not in the developed world for an average person. That's my opinion.
Very good. Michael, what do you think?
The basics, so not smoking, getting lean, regular exercise, focusing on sleep, defining a healthy diet, eating real food, almost no processed food. But then even within eating a healthy diet, I mean, if you're going to eat red bell peppers and, collard greens and romaine lettuce, this stuff is expensive. It kind of prices people out. But even just eating real food, if it's conventional and not organic, you can push lifespan out from an average of, 75, 80 to about 15 years longer. That's well documented in published studies. Now, do you want to go beyond 90 when considering maximizing human lifespan is 122 currently? I'd start with the basics, which is a $35 test, USD, which is the clinical chemistry and metabolic panel that gives you biomarkers of kidney, liver, immune, red blood cells. $35 test. So even if you do that 8 times a year, we're talking, $300 or less. And that's actually how I started. That's actually a big part of the guts of my approach, and not going into all the quote unquote fancy things. almost no supplements. So even just focusing on the basics and having just one basic blood test can get you very far.
Wen, what do you think?
Yeah. In terms of supplements, like they're not really needle movers, and you can do a lot of replacement instead of addition to cut down on your costs. Like stop eating out, stop going to the club or something, and cook. It shouldn't really cost anything. Like it can be zero or even negative, I think. But if you were asking specifically about a supplement, I'm gonna put it on DHA and EPA because I think a lot of people just don't like fish. I like fish, and I eat plenty of fish, but I think a lot of people they're not fish people. So
That's right. Then you're saying because that's where you get omega-3s and stuff like that, fatty acids.
yep, DHA and
Got
EPA fish oil.
Adam, you have a budget figure in mind?
Well, I just want to say that this is the sad reality of 2026, that most of the interventions, those really move the needle, are totally free, right? Eat well, sleep in time, and exercise. And this is not good. I want to live in a world where rich people can actually buy meaningful interventions. Those are just as meaningful as exercising. And if they are able to buy it, then the price is going to come down, of course, because economics, right? That's my take on it.
I really love the feedback from you guys, and this has been so helpful. I just wanted to end on one thought. You guys are obsessed, some might say, in a good way, with measurement and metrics and improvement and everything that you guys do day in and day out. I'm just wondering where's the room, what's the yardstick for things that, like something like wisdom. As you grow older, the hope is that you become wiser, you become a little more patient, you become maybe a little more spiritual, some people might say. How do you guys measure, growth in that area of wisdom and life experience? And is that important also for well-being? And how do you measure that? Zdenek, do you want to take a crack at that?
Yeah, I think that's a pretty important thing. And my girlfriend is always pushing me in these areas. And I am seriously interested in Buddhism and also in Taoism, studying their texts like Tao Te Ching, and also something from Hinduism like Bhagavad Gita. And I think this is an underappreciated area because it can help you a lot with your cortisol levels, for example, and generally the peace of mind is absolutely critical for well-being. Why live to 120 when you are stressed about dying and afraid of death? So I think also the concept of memento mori should be in our minds, and we should be able to think about death and don't be scared of it, and
Wonderful.
to face it with dignity if it comes.
Wonderful. Michael?
I have a different perspective on this, or maybe not a different perspective, but I am classically trained as a scientist, and although I have it on a different shirt, not this shirt, I have a shirt and a motto that is figuring stuff out is my drug. So, this goes to Wen Z's point about just go to bed on time, whereas most of the world is doing all kinds of other stuff they interpret as fun. Nothing is more fun for me than discovery. And this isn't about, reading somebody's book or reading a scientific paper. It's part of it is discovering patterns in my own data that I can help improve my own health and potentially longevity. And then as a part of that discovery, helping others discover their own personalized recipe. So that's where the wisdom comes from for me.
Wonderful. Wen, what do you think?
Yeah, I think this wisdom stuff, like it can come in the context of science and health and longevity. Like it doesn't, I don't know, for me it doesn't have to be a separate thing. Like you can learn plenty of that along the way of in the context of science, in terms of health, in terms of geoprotection. If we were talking about like spiritual stuff, I personally don't practice religion, but I think there are some epidemiological studies showing that people who are spiritual and religious, they, have better health outcomes. But I think it's also because like we know that social connection is a huge part of longevity and
Right.
health. Having loved ones and friendship and all those things.
Wonderful. And Adam, I'll give you the last word on this one.
Right. So I believe I lived a life of thinking too much, and I would have probably benefited from more doing than thinking. And I did examine many of the big topics of philosophy previously, and I'm not sure if it aided me well enough to go into these topics, these fascinating topics, but nevertheless somewhat also useless. So I would say more doing and less thinking.
Got it.
I'd like to push back against that. Whatever all of those things you mentioned that led you to this current iteration of you, and this is going to sound like I'm fanboying, but I wouldn't change a thing. I appreciate your perspective in this field. And you're the ringleader, so you're on track, Adam.
We'll
That's
see
nice.
in 100 years. Where do you guys see, now that we passed the initial phases of the rejuvenation Olympics, the first year of the longevity World Cup, where can the field, and perhaps when they start to talk about in the limits, then it might even just goes, the popularity of this thing goes up like crazy. But anyway, where do you guys see us in a couple of years as longevity as a sport?
I don't know, because I've never really treated it as like a competition. And I don't know if any of the other people that are ranked pretty highly on this or that take this really seriously, I don't know if at the moment they treat it as like a competition. It's more of like, us versus disease
Nature.
and death.
Definitely, we're in competition against aging and longevity for sure. Like less against each other, us against us. Our best data, but it's going to grow. How big we can grow is we'll find out, right? So it's like how many Einsteins and how many Nikola Teslas, and put whoever else, the extreme of the extreme of scientists or inventors or whatever you want to call it. That sphere, that bubble is limited, right? So are we limited because it's just so niche? But for sure, growth. I mean, it's not going to be 200 people. How big can we be? We'll find out. So
Yeah, well, I think we're definitely going to get a lot more participants. Like Whoop has blown up.
but that's easy because it's just a few metrics and you can wear it and it's easier to interpret. It's just two or three, a few biomarkers. It's not very complicated. The biomarkers can be more complicated, but for me, not. But for other people, maybe.
Yeah, but I think we're definitely going to see a lot of growth. Like a lot of people that weren't around me that weren't that serious about all this stuff. Like everybody's getting a Whoop now or a ring.
Nice.
On the these like groups, like Whoop groups, teams, or whatever. I think it'll grow. Like
That's another competition we could do. Like how have you kept HRV high and resting heart rate low over a 5-year span? Or because then that changes during aging too, right? How well are your these CV, cardiovascular related metrics? So, and it's measurable every day, right? It's easy.
Do your friends know when that you're here in the longevity World Cup on number 3? What do they say?
I think my closest friends, they kind of know me. They know how I'm like. They're like, okay, cool. Like I don't know, he's nerding out on some stuff. And he knows I like science. But I think some of my other friends, like the most unhealthy ones, like the Midnight Popeyes friends, they kind of like when they ask me about it and I tell them about it, I don't know, they look at me with a sense of like disgust. Like
They're worried
what?
about you.
Like
What about you, Zdenek? You have an
Yeah,
army
I
of
would say
students.
I would say so. For example, at least some of my students are interested in the competition, and I think I can somehow inspire them to a healthier lifestyle. And I also make them negative remarks in the class when they have these energy drinks on the desks and so on, and chips. So even today they ask how much money would they have to pay me for drinking a single energy drink and so on. But on the other hand, I think that the competition shouldn't be complicated. We should use like at least PhenoH and maybe something that's not really inaccessible. Maybe it is board's age, or what do you think here?
Yeah, I think the
What's
next
the
one coming
plan
out,
if it's not a secret?
you mentioned
What
it, right? It's like there's a fair few biomarkers.
So every year, the criteria or the biological aging clock is going to change, but PhenoAge and the previous biological aging clocks stay as secondary, let's say, amateur competition. And the pro or the featured competition is always a new clock. I personally want to make the new clocks always somewhat better than the previous one. Like if we move from PhenoAge to boards, that's almost like an obvious upgrade because it doesn't punish athletic people anymore. Or if we move from boards to any other age that doesn't have chronological age as an input, then I think that will be also a conceptual material improvement on top of boards. So
Yeah,
that's
I
my
had to stop
thinking.
creatine before my test, or else my creatinine looks ugly.
Yeah, but in boards it's not a problem because there is this cystatin C, and creatinine is counted as a positive if it's higher. So it won't be a
Oh, right.
problem here. You won't have to stop
Yeah,
creatine. You could load
you
with
have to
boards,
start
for example.
doing mega doses.
Microdoses of other stuff, psilocybin. Now we get to the fun stuff.
There's a fair few more. I'm just looking at it. I don't know how many people are willing to pay for free tests, DHEAS, all the lipoproteins. But yeah, it's a good thing that we're still gonna have
Yeah.
PNOH up.
It turns out you cannot even get cystatin C in Singapore, so the Singaporean team actually went to Malaysia to get the blood tests for boards, So I think there will be some need of dedication and things gonna get more complex on the pro level of the competition over the years. And I think that's okay. People who do more complex tests are more serious about this entire thing, and perhaps we are gonna get better results as well this way.
Well, it's going to be hard for me to win because SHBG is a part of boards, and my SHBG is super high.
What's your board's age? Reduction.
It's consistently 15. I mean, it's in the same ballpark as
Minus
-15.
15.
A little bit less. A little bit less, but only because of the SHBG. Mine is outrageous. But as I mentioned to you on Instagram, it's SHBG goes up a lot. It's like or X on a calorie restricted. People on a calorie restricted diet, whether that's good or bad, I'm not yet sure. But then also total cholesterol, so total cholesterol is low in youth, peaks in midlife, and then declines towards the end of life. So Bortz was probably trained on an older population that didn't have a young, healthy population, so that a lower total cholesterol looks aged and not youthful, which my total cholesterol is very low. So it's going to make me look more aged. And that's another. And plus, I'm not willing to megadose vitamin D to try to biohack the test to get a younger. You can reduce it by 3 years if you just jack up your vitamin D levels. So, but I'm not going to do that just for the sake of biohacking it. So
I want to be cooked for that one. I have FH levels of cholesterol, so
yeah, so I probably won't win boards. I'll probably be competitive, but other people who are willing to take a lot of creatine and take very high megadose of vitamin D and probably have a little bit higher cholesterol, middle-aged levels, 200 or so. And then if SHBG levels that are, 50 or less, they'll do really well. But yeah, that's
We
okay.
can always cap things, right?
I don't know how you would cap that.
Well, for the vitamin D, you know how to cap that.
But then you could say, some people would say that, look, so for example, in meta-analyses, it's anything greater than 30 nanograms per mil is lowest all-cause mortality risk. But within that meta-analysis, there are studies that, it could be as high as like 75. But when you incorporate that singular study in the full spectrum of all studies, it's still anything greater than 30. So if you cap it at 75 and someone's got 100, they could say, look, in this study, lower all-cause mortality risk with 100. So it's hard. Are you going to cap it at 100 then? So even having it from 40, which is reasonable, to 100, which you can get from mega doses, is that really going to reduce your all-cause mortality risk or just reduce your Bort's age, right? So,
ChatGPT deep research.
how would that help the cap? I don't know.
Oh, it spits out a number.
Yeah.
And
I mean, I don't think we know that.
more.
Sorry, go ahead.
I just wanted to say it's a more if there is a debate, a scientific debate about something, a number still has to be found, and it's better to let an AI pull it out of their ass than pull it out of my ass.
But that's true. That may be true, but they miss studies. So you're assuming it's giving you the full net of the data. I have a study in mind, like albumin. How does albumin change during aging? And I'll ask it specifically, like, give me studies with more than 1 million participants. This is the study I have in mind. And it'll start giving me like a poorly prepared high school student for a test. It'll give me, in this study, albumin levels of 2,000 people. In this study of it, that I specifically asked for more than 1 million, but it doesn't have that 1 million. So it gives me the bullshit answer to try to get some points. So, we've got to be careful. Look, I don't know what the way to cap something that can be hacked is, because someone can make the argument that that's optimal for them. If you cap it at 75 and maybe they'll go to the limit of 74, but maybe 40 is actually physiologically relevant and healthier. How would you know, right? So they're hacking to a number and not necessarily to, what's optimal. But I don't know how you would fix that.
I think like even with these caps, like I think people make a fair point when they say that, everyone's like metabolic state is unique and,
Could be.
with these caps, like we really don't know that if your HDL is like very high or if your vitamin D is very high. We like a lot of those things, like we cap them and you start seeing increased mortality past a certain point because that's a diseased state. But for some people it may not be that way. Like I don't know. Like I guess it's just part of epidemiology, but like I don't know. Like it might not be harmful. So I don't know. It'd be hard to cap either.
But for HDL versus vitamin D, it's a bit different because if you said, hey, I want to raise my HDL, how do I do it? Much more complicated than, hey, I want to raise my vitamin D. Just pop the pill and up it goes, right? So, but yeah, the idea of what's optimal. I mean, if you have a study of like 16 million people in the HDL study that are used for my what's optimal target, it's hard to argue that's not a population-based average. But if the study had 1,000 people, is that representative of the broad millions? Harder to say. Probably a lot more variability there. But even if like for HDL, if you have a target of 50 to 69 based on 16 million people, could someone with a 75 be optimal based on other biomarkers and more context? Yeah, maybe, right? So, but less likely.
But even with those large studies, like what's driving the increased mortality for, like these out of range biomarkers? It could be disease. Like we don't know if like 80 is like really bad for certain metabolic contexts.
But when you have a study of so many millions of people and you're looking at all-cause mortality risk, it's a probability-based thing, right?
Yeah,
so
probability-wise for sure.
Yeah, but then like you're saying, could someone who's outside of that range, too high or even a little bit too low, could they be fine? because of their individuality stuff, for sure, that's definitely possible, but you would need more context. Like, is the higher, so things that can cause higher HDL, like alcoholism and liver disease and inflammation, is that a part of the story? Or are the liver biomarkers good? Metabolic health good? In conjunction with a little bit higher HDL? Okay, probably that's a safer approach than they're an alcoholic and their liver biomarkers are crazy and their HDL is crazy. That's probably bad news. But for the dichotomy for that versus the vitamin D, it's very difficult for most people to biohack HDL or biohack cystatin C, because you would really need to do some work to figure out how to increase that or decrease that. Whereas, if I want to increase even NAD is easy, right? Have I improved biological age because I popped the pill for 5 minutes? I don't know. So I got to balance. I got to juggle other stuff too. I could stay out forever, but
Yeah.
Gentlemen,
Okay.
this was a great conversation. Thank you everyone for coming.